Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordyn and welcome to a reading vlog that I am very excited for. This vlog is going to be completely dedicated to Aardvark Book Club, which if you don't know what that is, I will tell you. Off the bat, this is not sponsored by Aardvark. They have sent me some books for free, but I will explain the entire situation. So if you are not familiar with Aardvark, they are a book subscription service very similar to Book of the Month, with the format of them choosing 5 books every month as their featured picks. And if you subscribe to the service, I believe it's like $15.99 per month, then every month you get to pick one of those 5 books as your Aardvark Book Club pick. They will send it to you. You can also add on additional books for cheaper. It's just a fun way to find out about books that you might not have heard of otherwise. And for brand new hardcover books, that is cheaper than you can get them from most regular bookstores. I love services like this, mainly Book of the Month, so I was very excited to hear that there is another company coming out doing a similar thing. So when they started, I immediately signed up as a member. Their first month was October of this year, and the very first book that I picked and purchased is The Night Ship by Jess Kidd. I think this is a historical fiction book about a ship that sank, and I think there's some kind of mystery around it. What actually happened after I picked this book is Aardvark is a new company, so it took them a little while to get the books shipped out to people, which is totally understandable. I also think they got a lot more signups than they were initially expecting, which is a great problem to have, but slowed down their shipping times. So then they actually reached out, I think, to everyone who ordered a book that first month and said, hey, we will send you an additional book for free as kind of an apology and a thank you for waiting that additional processing time for them to ship the orders. They did allow you to pick the additional book you wanted, which I think is awesome. So I decided to pick The Marsh Queen by Virginia Hartman. I believe this is a mystery book really similar to Where the Crawdads Sing, which is a book I really enjoyed. So those are the first 2 books that I have. And then November books dropped, and even though I hadn't read my October books yet, I was still really excited to pick at least one book in November to purchase myself. I ended up buying 2. The first one that I picked in November is called Singer Distance by Ethan Chatanier. This is a sci-fi book that I believe has to do with talking to like aliens or people from another planet or something like that. Sounds really fun and interesting, and I love that they had a sci-fi book as one of their main options. And then I also picked as an add-on and purchased The Other Side of Night by Adam Hamdy, which I believe is a mystery thriller. I don't really remember the specifics about what this one is about, but it looked good, so I got it. And then after I got those books in November, I actually reached out to Aardvark because I have seen them sending PR packages and books to other bookish influencers. So I thought I would reach out and just say how excited I was for the service and see if there was any chance of like collaboration in the future. And they so generously offered to send me 3 additional books from their November picks. So on top of those books that I already mentioned, I also have Closer to Okay by Amy Watson. I believe this is a hard-hitting, emotional, contemporary book, which I was strongly considering buying as part of my normal box. They also sent Gilded Mountain by Kate Manning, which is a historical fiction book. I don't remember the details, but definitely sounds up my alley as something I would enjoy. And then they also sent me kind of a wild card. Not a book I ever would have chosen for myself, but who knows? I am kind of open to reading anything at this point, but they sent Ithaca by Claire North. Don't know anything about it, but it appears to be fantasy and possibly like Greek mythology inspired. Outside of my comfort zone for sure. So that means that I have 7 books in my Aardvark TBR that I have not read yet, and I just wanted to make a dedicated reading vlog to reading a bunch of them. I'm not going to read all 7 of them in this video, but I'm going to aim for 3 or 4 in the next week. And as far as which ones I'm going to read, I thought it would be fun to choose one of my October book picks, one of my November book picks, and then one of the books that they sent me for free that I didn't pick on my own. That way I'm getting the full range of the Aardvark spectrum, and that will allow me to kind of evaluate Aardvark Book Club's book selection process and whether they really are picking the best of the best books every month for us to choose from, and whether I can trust their selections and recommendations, especially because none of these books I had heard of before seeing them on Aardvark, which I feel like can be a huge service and a pro to using a subscription service like this, is being introduced to books that I wouldn't have known of otherwise. I'm totally willing to pay for that and really excited about that idea if they turn out to be great books. But that is what we will be putting to the test. So I did go ahead and start my first book for this vlog. Last night there were reading sprints on Keisha's channel from A Book Like You. I joined them just in the chat and I asked them to pick, should I start a science fiction, a historical fiction, or a mystery thriller? I think that's what I asked, or maybe I asked contemporary. I can't remember, but they voted mystery thriller. So I went ahead and started The Other Side of Night by Adam Hamdy. Again, this is one of the November book picks that I chose for myself and purchased myself. And this book is very interesting so far. I'm very intrigued to see where this goes. And to be honest, I'm gonna have a hard time describing the synopsis of this book. I'm only 40 pages in. And actually, I first started this book on audio. It is on Scribd. And I was only listening to it without reading the physical copy, and I was quite confused. There are like 2 prologues before actual chapter 1, and they're both from different perspectives than chapter 1 is from, and I was getting the characters confused. I was not sure what the format was, so I decided to start it over. I read it physically along with listening to the audio, and I'm very glad that I did that because I am grasping it a little bit better, but still not really sure what this book is about. Basically, the preface is like a letter written by this guy who has a son, and very clearly they have a strained relationship, but we're not really sure why. And it's basically the dad saying he wrote this book to explain what happened with his son. And then from there we go into part 1, which is an interview format extract from court files. So it's basically like one person interrogating another person. Totally new characters, we're not sure who they are. And then chapter 1 starts kind of as a normal narrative following a main character named Harriet, who wasn't in either of the previous 2 parts, but we're following her. I think she's a police officer who had something happen at work that caused her to be fired or laid off or something. And then chapters 2, 3, and 4 continue following her perspective. So again, I'm on page 40 and just very curious to see how all of these characters come together, what it all means, what the explanation of this book is, what the mystery of this book is. Still a little bit unclear. This book is less than 300 pages long, so it's gonna be a quick one no matter what, and I am extremely intrigued to see where it goes. So that is going to be the first book that I finish for this vlog. I will check in with you once I have finished it and can give you maybe a little bit better of an explanation about what this book is, but for sure my thoughts on it and whether I would recommend it. And then the other books that I'm leaning towards reading for this video are probably The Night Ship by Jess Kidd. Again, this is that very first pick that I picked in October. That's a historical fiction. And then just for variability of genres, I think I want to pick Closer to Okay by Amy Watson, because this is the hard-hitting contemporary. This is one that I did not pick and purchase. It's one that they sent me, and I'm very interested to read. And then we'll see if I have time beyond that, but I also really want to get to Singer Distance because it's the sci-fi. I'm also really interested in these slower looking historical fictions, and I also kind of want to take a chance on the fantasy. So I don't know, I may have to do a part 2 relatively soon after this video because I really am interested in all of them. But one thing at a time, one book at a time, I'm going to finish The Other Side of Night. Other things that will be going on in this vlog, you probably will see a lot of b-roll of me doing crafts and me making things for my daughter's birthday party, which is this month. It's a unicorn and princess themed birthday party, and I found a few things I want to make for it. So I'll be doing that and sharing that in this video. Otherwise, just reading the books and living life. I will check in when I finish this, when I have something to say. You know how reading vlogs work. Let's get on with it. Okay, hello. I am currently on sprints on Jesse's channel. I'm not sure if you can see that because I can't see the screen. It is Monday night and I finally just finished The Other Side of Night by Adam Hamdy. I feel like this book took me a really long time to get through for how short it is. It's under 300 pages, but I could not listen to this audiobook without also reading it physically. So it just took longer to find the time to be able to do that. But I'm really glad I did because I was able to give it my full attention. Every time I was reading it, I was fully engaged. It's the type of story meant to confuse you, and I'm so happy to say that the ending completely paid off. This book has two things kind of happen towards the end. One is it kind of changes genre and takes a little bit of a sci-fi twist from the standard mystery tone it was beforehand. And then also there's like a plot twist revealed. And that plot twist I was shocked by, and it did the thing where, you know, when you're reading a book and a plot twist happens and you're like, I need to reread this book immediately, to reread all the details leading up to this twist, and it just makes it all come together. This book did that so well, and even after finishing it, I actually did go back and reread the first two prologues and the first chapter of the book because it all just clicked so nicely. So what a pleasant surprise for my first read of the Aardvark Book Club. I would highly recommend this to people who are okay being confused for the majority of a story. It's a short book, so the pace I think stays pretty fast. You just don't really know how everything fits together and how the characters all know each other and fit into each other's stories. But also if you enjoy sci-fi elements, I think that's going to be important in your enjoyment of the ending of this book. So now that I'm on a high from finishing that book, I figure I should probably switch directions and go towards a contemporary just to kind of lighten the mood, although I think this is an emotional contemporary, so it probably won't lighten it that much, but get back into like a realistic story, hopefully a little bit more straightforward. I don't know really anything about the plot of this book. It appears to be about a main character named Kyle who is not doing well. She seems to have been harming herself physically, is checked in as an inpatient at Hope House, some place called Hope House, and is now being taken care of by some doctor, and yeah, things are gonna go from there. I am sure there are going to be some triggers for this book, so I will definitely name those as I get into the plot, but I'm just gonna jump into this. I can get the audio through Hoopla, so hoping I have a little bit more luck being able to listen to this while doing other things. I can kind of fly through it a little bit faster. But either way, one excellent book down from Aardvark Book Club, and hopefully another excellent one on the way. Again, this is one of the books from November that I did not originally pick, but was somewhat interested in, and they sent me for free in one of their boxes. So after reading this, I will have read a book that I've chosen and a book that they've chosen, and hoping I have good luck with all of them. I will check in once I'm a little bit into this one and can give you a synopsis and my initial thoughts. Okay, hello, it is the next day. I am in my big comfy, I think it's actually called the Comfy. Yeah, it's like a big wearable blanket. I only had one meeting this morning that I needed to be on camera for, and then after that I was like, it's a comfy day. So this is what I'm wearing, and I have a few updates to provide. The first thing I wanted to talk about is the Aardvark Book Club app. I was on here earlier because I wanted to input my rating of The Other Side of Night. This does have a similar rating system to the Book of the Month app, which just has you put whether you loved, liked, or disliked a book, so you can generally keep track of the books that you've received and your thoughts on them. And it looks like Aardvark has similar options where the best one is amazing, second one is admirable, and the third one is average. So it looks like you don't even get to put like a negative one, and all of those are spelled with 2 A's like Aardvark, of course. So I'm gonna put amazing because that was 5 stars. And then another thing that I found or noticed on the app is that there are like discussion posts that you can join for your books, and actually any of the books. So even if you haven't received the books through the service, it looks like you can join discussions if you end up getting the book like from a regular bookstore or listen to the audio or whatever. You can create a new topic if you'd like. And actually I created 2 new ones for The Other Side of Night. I thought it would be fun to discuss with some other people. So the first one I created was a post to talk about the ending and the spoilers of this book. Basically, I just made the topic line say the other side of night, ending, and final thoughts. Spoilers. And then I just wrote a little paragraph asking what people thought about the ending of the book and how it changed their enjoyment, because obviously for me it made it go from like a 3-star rating to a 5-star rating. And then I also created a topic to ask if people have recommendations for similar books to this, and I also in the paragraph put kind of the same little spoiler warning because the later direction of this book is much different from the initial parts of it. Kind of a spoiler warning that recommending similar books might spoil the end of this book. So I just did that a few hours ago. I haven't had any comments or responses yet, but I do think that's a really cool feature on the book club app. If you don't have people who read similarly to you in like your real life to talk about, or even if people on the internet aren't talking about these books that you get from Aardvark, you can find people through the app. And then one more thing to talk about within the app, actually Gwen reminded me of this and I thought it was a good thing to point out, that within the book descriptions on the app, when you're reading the synopsis and everything, at the bottom it does include content warnings, which is great. And as I talk about this next book I'm reading, Closer to Okay, this is one that has content warnings. The ones that are listed are mental illness, suicidal attempts, and suicidal thoughts. So I think that's great to include right with the synopsis. It's at the bottom, so if you consider it spoilers, you can not read it and you'll be fine. But for the people who need and want them, very nice to have them right on that same page. So now let's talk about Closer to Okay. I have been listening to this. I started it last night and I have been listening to it this morning, and I am 57 pages into it. And I am glad I'm reading this one after the last book because it's definitely much slower paced, kind of more calm, and just like a realistic story. And my brain is finding it pretty soothing to listen to. This is following our main character named Kyle, who is I can't remember how old she is, like 18-ish maybe, older teenager. She, at the start of this book, clearly has a history with self-harm, and she is healing from that. It does sound like she had a suicide attempt, and after that attempt she was put into this recovery house called Hope House, where she is with a group of people that are helping her heal. She is under the care of a doctor who is like meeting with her and telling her his recommendations for how she can further heal herself, and she is really just spending a lot of her time reflecting on herself and her situation and kind of her goals, what she wants to do. And this book really is just going to be all about self-healing and self-realization. She is really thinking about like her passions and interests. She's in charge of cooking and baking all of the meals for everyone who lives at this house for right now, and she really enjoys doing that. And really all that's happening so far for plot is there is a coffee shop across the street from the house that she lives in, and she goes there for the first time one day. It's kind of her first outing from the house, which she's really proud of. She goes to the coffee shop, gets some good coffee, and then realizes that they don't sell any food at the coffee shop. And she kind of thinks to herself like, oh, this would be kind of a cool opportunity to partner with them and figure out a way to sell baked goods along with the coffee. So she's kind of daydreaming about that, and she's been bringing over like samples of her baked goods, and she hasn't taken the plunge to actually ask the owners if that's something that they would be willing to incorporate in the future. But it kind of seems like that's her current goal, like that would make her happy to do that for them. Other side things that may become important, this doctor is strange. He seems to really not understand this main character as a person, and she's really concerned about the things that he's prescribing to her, and his evaluation of how she's doing. It just doesn't match up with how she's actually feeling she's doing, and even some of her friends within the house. She's concerned with the doctor's evaluation of their statuses as well, compared to when she talks to them, how she feels they're doing. I don't know, it's just very unclear what this doctor's motives are, and like if he's actually trying to understand his patients and truly heal them, or if he's just trying to make it look like he's doing the right thing or like rush the recovery. I'm not sure. And then it also seems like there might be some kind of romance with one of the coffee shop owners. It's like a grumpy sunshine actually not even Grumpy Sunshine. It's kind of like a grumpy guy and a very introverted, shy girl. So I'm not sure how this is gonna work out, if that actually is going to culminate into anything, but one of the owners is occupying a lot of her brain space as well. So I think that is basically the gist of this book. Again, overall, it's just a very slow and kind of relaxing pace. I'm definitely not bored. I'm not sure if 100 pages from now the case will be the same. I hope that something's gonna happen to drive the plot further along eventually, but for now I'm just enjoying being inside this main character's head and feeling for her and understanding her and seeing where she's gonna go from here. So I will go ahead and finish this book and let you know my final thoughts and whether I would recommend it. Fingers crossed for another pleasant surprise, just like my last book, but we will see. Of course, I will let you know once I finish. Alrighty, time to give an update. I did finish Closer to Okay. It's the next day. I listened to a bunch of this last night and then finished it up this morning. Unfortunately, this book for me was just okay. I think it's kind of a combination between like me problems and book problems. The me problems primarily is the fact that I don't suffer from depression or any of the mental illnesses kind of depicted in this story. And while I definitely don't think that's a prerequisite to reading and enjoying the book, I do think that prevented me from really connecting with this main character and what she's going through. And I do think that somebody who is suffering from depression or has some of the same thought processes and kind of triggers and coping mechanisms as the main character will just connect that much more and really see themselves in this character. And so because I didn't have that super close connection, I just felt a little bit more distant from this main character. This is also a very slice of life book, which I sometimes struggle with when there's not like an overarching goal or clear timeline or something that we're following the main character because of. Then sometimes my mind can wander and I can be like, okay, but what's the point? And the point of this is that there is no point. We're just following this main character at this time in her life and seeing how she is trying to recover from this really traumatic experience that she's gone through. And so again, I just think that's going to resonate with a certain type of reader who needs this book at a specific point in their life. And for that type of reader, it's just going to click and hit really hard for them. And for me, it just didn't, and that's okay. So those are kind of the personal things that I think are like me problems that kept me from super connecting to this story. Some other issues I had with it though are the main character I just felt like read really young. I think I mentioned at the beginning that I didn't know how old she was, and I guessed like 18-ish. She must be at least 21 because one of the scenes has her drinking in a bar or at a concert or something. So she must be 21 years old or older, and it didn't feel like she was to me. And again, I know she's in a very vulnerable state when this book is going on and she's not completely in control of her own life, and that looks different from any other 21-year-old who would just be out, you know, living on their own, etc. But something about like the internal monologues and just what was happening made me feel like this was a teenager we were reading about and we weren't. That also prevented me from rooting for the romance for some reason. Like it just didn't feel as mature to me as I feel like it could have and should have. And then the other issue I had was the whole situation with the doctor in here. I mentioned that it was weird in my first check-in, and I don't feel like we really got any more information about why it was weird, or like, was it actually objectively weird, or was it just this main character's relationship with him wasn't great? I don't know. I feel very confused by that. And even this main character towards the end is saying she feels like she didn't get the closure she wanted with this doctor. So that was a strange choice to me, because I feel like that could definitely be commentary on how some medical professionals treat mental health issues issues or like how different recovery and treatment methods affect people differently. I feel like there could have been some real good commentary there, and we just didn't get it. And then the last point I'll make on this book is that there is an author's note at the end. I always like reading author's notes. I feel like it really puts books into perspectives when you know like what was the motivation behind writing the book, maybe get some answers on why some decisions were made throughout the story. And this one made it clear that this is a very personal story for the author, and while it's not autobiographical, there are things about the main character that the author herself struggles with, mainly in how the depression manifests itself and what the thought spirals kind of look like and the coping mechanisms or kind of physical tics look like. I think that's really interesting and helpful to know, but again, just makes me feel like this is such a personal story that it's going to hit some people really, really hard and connect really strongly. But for other people who don't have those experiences, while it's good to gain awareness, it's not going to connect that much, and that's okay too. So I think I'm gonna land at 3 stars for this one. I was kind of waffling between 2 and 3 stars. 2 stars just feels a little bit harsh because it almost feels like I'm rating somebody's personal experiences low, and that's not what I want to do. I just didn't personally enjoy the reading experience of this book very much, but I can respect it for what it is. So we're gonna give it 3 stars and we're gonna move right along to the next book. And I want to jump genres again to really get the full spectrum of Aardvark Book Club. So I'm going to go with a historical fiction. We're gonna read The Night Ship by Jess Kidd. This is about, I believe, a shipwreck. The top of this front flap here says, based on a real life event, an epic historical novel from the award-winning author Jess Kidd. 1 shipwreck, 2 misfits, 3 centuries apart. So that's all the knowledge we're gonna go in with. I will start this book. I'll check in once I'm a little bit into it and can give you a synopsis. This one is a little bit longer of a book, which is gonna be nice to dive into. It's almost 400 pages long. So definitely some variation from the first 2 books that I read. So I'm gonna dive in. I'll give you an update when I have it once I'm a little bit into this story. Okay, my friends, I have an update. We have deviated from the plan a little bit since my last check-in. I believe the last time I checked in with you, I was about to start The Night Ship, and I did start this book, and I only got about 19% in before I decided to DNF it. And I don't feel great about that because I do think this is a book I could generally enjoy, but for some reason, I just feel like now's not the time. I don't know if I'm just not in the mood for historical fiction, or if this story is just not doing it for me, or if it's reminding me too much of like 3-star reads that I've had in the past, and I just don't want to push through this book for it to only result in a 3-star rating. I don't know, but I did decide to DNF it. I did get a very general gist of the story. So this is told in 2 timelines. The first timeline is on this ship, and it's in 1629. So very, very historical. And we're following this girl who's on this ship as an orphan. So she has nobody taking care of her, nobody watching over her. So she's kind of getting into trouble and mischief on the ship, but she talks a lot about like mystical, magical like creatures and things. And she's like looking for some kind of monster when she's on the ship, and she's like talking to other people on the ship, adults, trying to get them to help her look for this monster. And I'm just not all that interested in hearing a little girl talk about monsters and looking for them on this really historical ship. And then the other timeline we're following is in 1989 about this boy named Gil who lives with his grandfather, and he's a fisherman off the coast of Western Australia. This boy's mom just died, so he's living with his grandpa, just like following him in his daily routine fishing. I didn't really get to this part, but in the synopsis it says he discovers the story of an infamous shipwreck, which I'm assuming is the ship of that little girl. This setup and the vibe of the book is reminding me of The Attic Child by Lola J, which I just read pretty recently, because that was also like a historic situation happening and then following someone more recently learning about that historic situation and figuring out how the characters like tie in together with their heritage and everything. I just don't care that much. So I'm gonna put it down. I'm not sure if I'm going to unhaul this book or what, but as of now, it's a DNF and it's probably a permanent DNF. But if I happen to start to see great reviews for it or something, I could potentially pick it back up in the future. But I just don't see this being a story people get excited about. I don't know. Normally I can get down with historical fiction. This is just a little bit too far in the past and a little bit too strange of a setting. I'm not super into like the ship life or the fisherman's life. I don't know, not for me. So after DNFing this book, I figured I still did want to complete one more book for this video, and I decided to go with the one that I just felt in the mood for, and that was the sci-fi. So I read the entirety of Singer Distance by Ethan Chatanier already, and I'll keep my review for this one kind of quick because I do think this is a very niche book for a niche audience. I think there are very few people who are interested in science fiction anyway, but especially this type of science fiction. So let me talk about it. So this book is basically about an alternate recent history where Earth has made contact with Mars and they're sending messages back and forth on the surface of the planets. And I think the communication started like early 1900s was when Earth first saw something on Mars and they wanted to communicate back that they received the message, they can send something back. So they ended up carving like 3 giant lines in the earth to prove that they can make, you know, straight lines and intentional figures for the Martians to read. So they did that. They like burned it with fire really bright when Mars was in direct opposition of the planet, of that face of the planet. And then the Martians came back with 4 parallel lines. So it was a very clear, like, we see you, we're adding to that communication, and we're talking back. And then eventually it turns into the situation where Mars is basically sending Earth math problems to solve. And it's unclear if it is to test Earth and see how intelligent we are compared to them, or if they're trying to teach us something, or if they're just trying to like build the language of communication so that eventually they could send different messages. It's all very unclear, but eventually the math and the concepts get to be too much for humans to understand and be able to send back anything coherent. And because it's an alternate history, it's interesting because they talk about like Einstein working on these problems and other significant scientists in Earth's history really focusing on this communication with Mars. And then we're jumping into this story at 1960, where at this point it's been, I think, like 30 years since Earth has sent anything intelligent to Mars and they've confirmed that they understand. So scientists are now kind of at a standstill where they're like, I guess we just don't have the capabilities of understanding and communicating with Mars at this point. So like, we know there's intelligent life there, we just may not be intelligent enough to interact with them, which is kind of a weird, unsettling place to be. And then this story is following some students from MIT. They are grad students, and this group that we're following thinks that they have basically solved the most recent problem, and they are traveling to a place where they can lay out their message to Mars and are planning to communicate it. So that's what like the whole first third of the book is on that road trip there. We're learning about the characters, and specifically we're learning about our main character, who is a guy named Rick, and his relationship with one of the students named Crystal. They are in a relationship, and it's very clear that Rick thinks that Crystal is the genius. She's basically the one who figured out this whole problem, who knows what to send back, and is basically the only person on Earth who understands the concept that Mars is trying to communicate to Earth. And this book totally dives into that whole theory, like what is the concept? Specifically, it's about like distance and how we can't possibly understand everything about distances, and how something that is infinitely far away is the exact same as something that is in the exact same place as us. So like distance is a construct, kind of like time. And the book is kind of confusing, obviously, and it's always interesting science fiction as a concept, because The book is trying to make reasonable science and logical science, but it's fiction, so it's fake science. And the whole point of this book is that Mars is communicating science that humans cannot even grasp. So how can this author possibly explain it in a way that a casual reader can grasp if the point is that not even the world's smartest minds can grasp it? It's very interesting. It's definitely the type of science fiction that I love. So I was absolutely hooked at the beginning of this story. And I probably just lost a lot of you because most of you probably are not hooked by that premise. But I was curious to see where this went from there. And the rest of this book, I would say, is a combination between Rabbits by Terry Miles. That book focuses a lot on like contradictions and noticing patterns and relationships between things in your life. And that book has a game element, which this one definitely doesn't, but kind of similar vibes, as well as Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. That one specifically because it's kind of a sci-fi book, but really focused on character relationships, which is also where this book goes. And then lastly, kind of vibes from In the Quick by Kate Hope Day, which is a sci-fi book that I just recently read that really includes like the space elements and everything that goes along with like astronauts, astrophysics, etc. So like take those three books, combine them into one, change it a little bit, and it's Singer Distance. Unfortunately, my biggest gripe for this whole book is that it feels so pointless. It's so interesting, and I love a book that makes me feel dumb and makes me think, and I'm totally on board for it as long as there's a point. I just feel like there was no point in this book. Even the character relationships, I feel like you probably were supposed to care more about the characters than I did. I didn't really care for these characters all that much. I didn't find them very likable. I didn't really know what I was supposed to root for them. And then if you take that away, there just wasn't much other plot there. I was holding out hope that the ending would redeem it, kind of like The Other Side of Night, like something would just come out at the end to completely turn my enjoyment around, but it didn't. So now I'm trying to decide what to rate this book, and it feels like it's probably a 3-star, but like a low 3-star, especially because this is the type of book that I don't know who to recommend this to. Maybe if you liked Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, I would say that's the most similar vibe and like mood you need to be in to read this book, but it's way more science heavy and way more about these scientific and philosophic concepts that you really can't understand. So like very niche audience, but if that sounds like something that would be up your alley, I would recommend giving it a try because it's definitely a unique book. Even though there are 3 other books that I just directly compared it to, I do think it's doing something pretty different. So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm gonna go with 3 stars, and I think I'm going to end this video here, even though of course I do still have some other Aardvark books that I haven't read yet. I think I'll just save them for the future. And I will conclude this by saying, even though I had a wide range of enjoyment results reading these books, that still excites me. I like the possibility that I'm going to pick up books that I don't know anything about, and they could be love, they could be hate. Like I could find an absolute joy and surprise of a book that gives me one of the biggest shocks of the entire year. That to me is worth reading 3-star books and DNFing books I'm not in the mood for if there's a possibility of a real gem coming through. So as of now, I definitely plan on continuing my Aardvark membership and continuing working with them if they're interested in the future. I think their covers are beautiful, and I think they've done a great job curating books that have unique premises and are not the same thing that a lot of us in the book community just keep seeing over and over again. It's not hyping up already popular authors. I love all of that. So be on the lookout for more Aardvark reading vlogs from me in the future. Let me know if you have subscribed to Aardvark or if you would consider doing so in the future. Or if you're not, let me know what's holding you back. Do you not do any book subscription services, or is there something that Aardvark needs to do in order to get you to sign up? You know, what do you look for in a service like this? Let me know if any of the books I've talked about in this video sound interesting to you and you might pick them up in the future. But other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.